evening, everyone. Welcome to the North Kingstown School Department Building Subcommittee meeting of March 7th. Before we ask for public comment, we have the attendance sheet here, so I'm going to pass it around. I'll start it to my left and go all the way around and somewhere around here. That'll be great. Just sign your name where you see it. We have more than a quorum, which is great. So I'll start my left, and if you can come back here, and we'll just send it around. First item is public comment. I don't know if we have a sheet up there, but just to, we do this anyway, so if anyone would like to provide some public comment, if you could let us know. It's an open forum. Okay, great. Second item is to approve the meeting minutes of December 13th. Is there a motion in order to approve those?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain from those, I wasn't at that one.
Okay, thank you.
Before we do that,
Yes,
want to introduce the new finance director?
please do.
Okay. So before we move on to the next item on the agenda, I just want to take a second. I want to introduce our new finance director, Leslie Ann Powell, and we welcome Leslie Ann here to North Kingstown. She's been here 3.5 days, but she's already been a tremendous help. So we really looking forward to working with you and also having you here on our building subcommittee. So thank you.
Thank you very much, glad to be here.
You're welcome.
And I'll turn the next two items over to our superintendent.
Yes. So the next item is a review of the Phase 1 environmental study. So we have a presentation tonight from PAR. And I'd like to introduce Michael Flynn. Michael is a principal environmental scientist for PAR, and he is here tonight to give the presentation of the Phase 1 study that we conducted at Wickford Middle School.
Very good, thank you. Thank you for having me, and hello, public. As you guys know, we did a environmental study out at Wickford Middle School, and the primary purpose of that is to identify environmental concerns that might affect our construction project. We used the ASTM standard, which probably doesn't mean much to you guys, but just to put that in context a little bit, that's a standard that's largely developed over the last 20, 30 years, along with Superfund regulations. And it's really geared towards commercial transactions. When one private property is selling commercial property to another party, they would have to do this sort of study. And it's usually to establish the innocent landowner's defense, and there's a whole history behind that I won't get into. But it's also used in this application, and it's not really an exact fit, it's pretty darn close. And I'll get into some of the terms that are used in the standard that are particular to the standard, but have a nuance relative to commercial transactions, but not really significant to how you guys want to use this report.
Can you just repeat what the name of the standard is? I missed what you said.
It's the ASTM, which is
ASTM.
American Standards and Test Methodologies, 1527-21. If you do a Google search on that number, it'll pop up. It's usually you have to pay for it, but I think you can access parts of it, various websites. So my name is Mike Flynn. I'm a senior environmental scientist. I have over 35 years of experience. I work with PAR Corporation. PAR Corporation is a civil and environmental engineering firm based out of Lincoln, Rhode Island. And PAR has been around since the 1970s. So the subject of the study is the Wickford Middle School, located at 250 Tower Hill Road. You guys are probably all familiar with the property. It's been a school for a very long time. I think it was built somewhere in the 30s, if memory serves correct. The proposed improvements are going to include demolishing the existing building and building a new one on top of the athletic field in front of the building. There'll also be some other improvements relative to parking and circulation, drainage, septic upgrades. So the purpose of this meeting is to inform the town, the building committee, the public, of what sort of conditions we found and how to use that information. The additional assessment tools, if needed, could include subsurface investigations, borings, soil samples, groundwater samples, to the extent that we need to comply with RIDE, and also to develop meaningful construction data so that you don't get into a condition during construction possibly a contractor, having conditions that he didn't expect. So if there's like some sort of contamination centered around some old storage tanks or with the septic fields, the last thing you want is the contractor to say, hey, I wasn't prepared for this. This is gonna be a big change order. I gotta stop and evaluate these conditions and what it means, and then everybody's, in turmoil. So these are the reasons I kind of just spelled out right now, but to do this study, it's responsible and prudent, it's required by the law, and it provides an opportunity to plan for environmental issues prior to design and construction. This is the particular law. This is Rhode Island General Law, Chapter 23. This is the law that was put into place. Believe it or not, many schools are built on available property, and it's available for a reason. Oftentimes it had a checkered or industrial or manufacturing history, or fill material was brought in for a wetlands area, and hey, this is a great place to put the school. We're not getting any tax revenue out of this piece of property, so let's build a school on it. And so that happened a few times, and the state started saying, hey, we really got to do better about this. Let's invite the community to give us their insights on property prior to building schools or changing schools or rehabbing schools. So the first step of the due diligence process is this phase 1 study. We recently completed it just last month. It includes historic records review, site recon, interview with facility and local officials, and a review of governmental databases. There are a large number of governmental databases out there. Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management is just one source of them, but they have records on underground storage tanks, hazardous waste generators. There are other federal databases. There's probably more than 20, I can't remember them all, but we go through that and look through all those records to see if there's any sort of insights into the property history and past and potential concerns. Should these conditions merit, the next step would be a phase 2, and the phase 2 is actually doing some soil investigation, groundwater investigation, as I was mentioning earlier. So these are the terms I was alluding to earlier. There's terms called recognized environmental conditions. These are terms, this is this actual definition. It's great, it's right here. So it talks about meeting these sort of standards of actually knowing that there's hazardous substances in the ground that have been documented or that are highly likely based on similar situations and other scenarios. And so if you have that sort of condition, that rises to a recognized environmental condition. There's this other term, and it's referred to a de minimis condition. And this is really kind of relative, again, to the commercial transfer. A recognized environmental condition is really kind of saying to the buyer or the property, hey, there's a problem, you should be aware of it. Take that into consideration as you go forward, because you will be held responsible to remediate that in the future. Whereas a de minimis condition is sort of, yeah, there might be some sort of problem. It's probably so minor that it's not going to be a big deal, but we really don't know. But it's considered minor. If you were to call up DEM and say, hey, that building once upon a time had lead paint on it, DEM's not going to mobilize and come out and sample the soil and get all worked up about it. They're going to say, do you know that it's contaminated? And you say no. They'll say, fine, just kind of go along with your life. But where that's still important to you guys is that could affect your construction work and your work habits. And it'd be important for the contractor to know that, because he has to take into consideration protection of his health and safety for his workers. It's important for the town to know that, because obviously you'll have kids around, you'll have neighbors around, and you'll have to get rid of some of the soil if it's displaced during construction features. So if it has to be displaced, you just can't drag it down to some other place and get rid of your contaminated soil there. You have to manage it properly through a licensed facility or an appropriate disposal facility that can handle that. So in some sense, I'm going to make a distinction between these two because the standard does. In reality, it's not going to matter much for you guys. You should consider de minimis conditions still a potential concern for your construction project. So as I was mentioning, this is the definition for a de minimis condition. Again, it could be that there's a release, generally doesn't present an immediate threat to human health or the environment, and wouldn't be the subject of an enforcement action. I'll give you a couple examples just to whet your appetite. For this site, a few de minimis conditions are that the site has a cemetery, I think, to the south and to the north. Cemeteries have, dead bodies that were pumped full of embalming fluid once upon a time. The current methodologies include formaldehyde. Former methodologies included arsenic-bearing compounds. Both of those are contaminants in the environment. The caskets there long enough, the bodies there long enough, everything decomposes and gets into the ground. Whether it's enough volume to move in the groundwater onto your project and be a problem, that's a tough evaluation without actually collecting samples to make a determination. And if you're not going to dig over in that area, then it's probably not as big of a deal. So there's some variables associated with sort of de minimis conditions. So here's the site. Each one of these white clouds points out something that we made note of during our investigation. There's a lot of clouds there, but really what boils down to primarily for us there's a number of underground septic leaching fields, septic tanks on both sides of the property, a leaching field over here, a leaching field in this area, a septic tank in here. There were a number of USTs up in the northwest corner that were removed, and according to the records and the observations at the time, there weren't any releases of petroleum, so we can take that at face value, that there aren't any impacts there, but a lot of times it depends where you sample. So
UST is an underground storage tank?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, very good, thank you. And there's an AST back here. AST is an above ground storage tank, and that's a large tank over here. Anytime you have storage tanks like this, you have fuel oil deliveries. Guys get a little messy sometimes, they overfill. Old tanks in the ground start to rust and rot, and pipes tend to release some petroleum. So there are always, suspect sources that we're concerned about. Any sort of signs of stressed vegetation, we ask ourselves, why is it stressed? Is it stressed because there's contamination there? Or is it stressed because of cars parking on the grass or not getting good irrigation? It's something that you take note of during these studies. Generally, the observations that we had looked like the stressed vegetation was largely related to traffic, foot traffic, and vehicle traffic. It didn't seem to be indicative of any sort of contaminated sources. The main thing that we identified one REC, and it was the septic fields. Septic fields obviously are taking any of the waste generated in the building, so any of the maintenance activities, paints, paint thinners, lubricants, detergents. Detergents are picking up something, usually grease and oils or other products. They get into the plumbing and out into the fields. Out into the fields they go. How much? Probably not a lot at any one given time, but over 100 years or close to 100 years, you could get some accumulation that could have an impact on the soil and the groundwater conditions out at the site. De minimis conditions that we noted were largely associated with the cemetery. There's a close nearby Shell station. We'll see, I've listed the other de minimis conditions. Probably the building perimeter. Once upon a time, it looks like you got some relatively decent windows out there. I'm sure they're not original. Once upon a time, it might have been painted with lead. Any caulking around the building often has PCBs or asbestos containing caulking materials. If they delaminate and find their way into the soils and groundwater, that could be an issue. So that sort of thing. So the RECs, the septic field and the cesspool, for the reasons I just talked about, there are at least 2 septic tanks located on either side of the tank and several cesspools. The location of the cesspools was a little difficult to nail down in the record, but we know they're out there. Exactly where and how many is sort of something that we really kind of need to refine the records on. Each septic tank and field is likely to receive small quantities of maintenance products. So here we see at least 2 covers, each labeled sewer. These were probably related to those septic tanks that were on the southwest corner of the building. This is just a picture of the field. We know there's some septic tanks located out there in the field. Not septic tanks, septic fields rather, leach fields. This is in the back of the school where there's an indication of a large leach field out there. The cemeteries would be a de minimis condition. If you called up DEM right now and said, hey, there might be some bodies rotting in the cemetery, they're not going to jump on their horse and drive out here all alarmed about it. They're going to say, is there any problem? Is arsenic or formaldehyde showing up in anybody's drinking water? If not, leave them lie, you know? So, here's a picture of where we understand the former cemetery used to be. Building perimeter, as I said, for lead paint, primarily maybe asbestos and PCBs. There's a picture of the facade, so you can see the windows, and it's largely brick and masonry, but the windows probably once at a time probably were wood framed. There's an abandoned AST, which I've been told is not so abandoned, just very rarely filled up. So, but it's out there. It still reads about half full from what we can tell.
Half full of what?
Half full of oil.
Got it.
And here's a picture of the AST. There are historic USTs, 4 in total, that were located near the northwest corner of the site building. These tanks, as I understand it, have been removed, and there were no obvious impacts associated with them. This is our site recon. All these pictures are from our site recon done in February. There was a documented release of fuel oil that would constitute a historic recognized environmental condition. The records that we were able to get our hands on were less than precise. I indicated an area in the northeast corner of the back of the building. Why there would be a release of fuel oil out there, I have no idea. Anybody want to chime in? And anybody remember what happened? Let me know. GZA was the consultant that remediated it. They didn't have any site plans. They said it was near TP4, but they had a site figure. It didn't show what TP4 was. So I don't know. But it was out there someplace, and apparently it was cleaned up to the extent that no further action was needed. Which means that where they took samples, they were below the regulatory threshold. You know, what the soil was where they didn't sample it, presumably would be the same or lower. Maybe, maybe not. As I was talking about stress vegetation, it really appears to be related to cars and some stormwater runoff more than anything related to contamination. Just a quick series of some of the stress vegetation that we saw. And again, this was taken in February. It's cold. Grass isn't really growing all that great anyways, but nonetheless, it didn't look, some areas looked a little bit more stressed than others. There were reports, and I want to let everybody know, we looked into some hearsay reports that the front of the building may have at one time been a landfill or used for disposal purposes. These largely came off of Facebook postings. We looked at the historical records. This is an aerial going back to 1939. You can see the school is there. We don't see in any other historical records any indication that the place was used as a landfill. There's nothing denoting it. That doesn't mean that absolutely for sure it's not or it hasn't been. Rhode Island is one of the original colonies. Goes back 1800s. Not all those records would be available for us to look at. It's possible, but some of the reports that were there were that there were cars out there and the roofs collapsed. Well, cars have only been around since the turn of the century. And we got pretty good documentation, at least back that far. Here's some progressions of the site development through the years. Just, again, more to demonstrate that we looked into this issue. Here's 1970s. There's no indication of that field being used for anything other than an athletic field. 1995 and 2018. These are USGS. USGS stands for the United States Geological Survey. These go back to the 1800s. And they're pretty good historical records. So that you can orientate yourself a little bit, the school is right here in this lower fin. This looks like a whale's tail, and this lower portion of the whale's tail fin, that would be where the school is located.
That area traveling through, like I see the blue is the stream, yeah. What,
What's
is that
the
just a
stream?
change in elevation?
The squiggly orange line, is that what you're talking about?
This-
Yeah, is that an elevation
This one here
change?
where I'm moving the mouse?
Running from
No,
north
the
to
big
south.
one. This
No.
one.
So
Oh,
from
this?
where it says Wakewood down.
Contour.
This,
Oh, yes, those are contour lines for elevation, correct. Yeah, all these lines here indicate elevations. So here's 1919. So yeah, what we're looking for is basically, does the contours stay the same throughout the years? And oftentimes ponds are shown as ponds in the 1800s and later on because of drainage activities and man-made activities. These get filled in and all of a sudden the pond disappears, or the wetlands aren't so wet. That means they were filled in. And whenever something is filled in, we don't know what they used to fill it in with. A common practice, especially in urban Boston and in the greater New England area, oftentimes what was used was wood ash and coal ash and municipal waste ash. One way to get rid of waste at the time was to burn it. Then you end up with a big pile of burnt stuff. What are we gonna do with this? Oh, stick it over in the wetlands so we can build a school there. Oh, great idea, yeah. And everybody goes along, and then you don't know what. So here's a picture now, 1942, after the school was built. You can see this little icon here, indicates the school. It's in that lower fin of the whale's tail. The contours obviously have been modified a little bit, but not really so much as to be alarming. The pond seems to have shrunk a little bit, and the stream is gone, but nothing terribly alarming. Same thing, here's just another picture, 1970 topo as the site gets developed and the area is developed along with it. We don't see it ever being labeled as a landfill or significant elevation changes. And right up to 2021, see the school is still denoted there, the pond is still there. What's interesting is they moved the George Thomas plot across the street for some reason. Not sure that that's accurate, but you can see there are a large number, all in this whole area over here, there's a large number of cemeteries. There's the Captain George Tennant plot to the north, and the George Thomas plot. We think it's right here in this corner, but they show it over here now at this point. So we take all that information at the end of it, we come up to a conclusion. You know, are there problems out here? Are they big problems, little problems? There are enough issues out here at the site between the septic fields, and they cover a large area of the property, and what's gone down in them primarily, that it makes sense, depending on where you're going to dig for this project, where you're going to displace soils, to know what you're going to get into before you get into it, so that you don't have a condition where all of a sudden the contractor breaks ground and he finds a landfill, or he breaks ground and he finds oily material from the septic fields that nobody knew back in the 50s. They dumped a bunch of oil waste down the drain for whatever reason. And now it's in your leach field, and the contractor says, well, I didn't plan on dealing with this. I'm not a remediation guy. We got problems. So our conclusion is, use this information in your design process. And if you want to know, before you start to invest a lot of money in architectural design services and civil design services, is this site, a ticking time bomb? And you don't want to waste your money on architectural services where you know you're going to have a big remediation problem? Or is it something that you can really wait to, or you want to do a combination of evaluations? Basically, I would think that the biggest concern, although it's not supported in the record, is the landfill out front. Is that truly there or not? Like I said, the historical record doesn't support it, but people say that there was a landfill out there. We can't prove it one way or the other. But certainly, if you're going to build your school on that property, you don't want to build it on top of a landfill. How big of a problem or how realistic is that as an issue? You saw what I saw and what I'm basing my decisions on, and it's really up to you guys. You guys are bearing the risk and paying the money, so that's how you want to use this information. And then I would say, once you have, if you cross that bridge, and you're just worried about what impacts you might have with the septic fields, I would try to design around them if you can, so you're not disturbing those areas. But if you're going to disturb them, you have to disturb them because you need a utility line, or that's where you want to put the school. Well, then evaluate them, see if they're going to be a big impact to your project. See if you're going to have a ride-on remediation project, or if you're going to have a waste management issue, and then design around it. You can always build things up instead of digging things down. So that's what you have. Anybody have any questions, comments? I'd be glad to entertain them and try to help you guys with your project.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, based off of this, you're saying we would need to conduct some level of a phase 2 ESA.
Yes.
But am I correct in that until we know the footprint of the building on the site, we can't move ahead, or would you recommend?
I would recommend a staged approach. This first stage kind of gives you an idea of what you're up against. The next stage would be, where are we thinking about building the building, and are there any things there that could really slow us down? And like I was saying before, if you're planning on building in that front area in the athletic field, I'd want to know if there was a landfill there, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't even want to spend another $1 on design services until I knew that, because that might alter the cost of this project significantly, unless you wanted to build up, and then you'd have to build up with fill and change. There'd be different engineering considerations, but that would be a significant obstacle, I would think.
How do we do that?
Well,
Do you do
you could
borings?
do it. You could
do you
do.
go down and see if you hit
Well,
anything weird? Like,
yes.
how do you do that?
Yeah, you normally would either use borings,
Yeah.
and so that, just so you know, a boring, you bring out a drill rig. Some of these are no bigger than pickup trucks, and they go down about 20, 30 feet, depending on the rig. But you end up with a hole about 3 or 4 inches in diameter, and you're penetrating that down 20 inches, and you come up with whatever you come up with. But you're only looking at a very small percentage of the soil that's down there, and only in that one point. So you could totally miss a landfill if you only did one boring. So you'd want more borings. How many borings is the right number? You'd probably want some sort of decent spatial coverage. But the more borings you want, the higher confidence you'll get, but the more money you'll spend. 3 borings out there, is that enough? Again, you have a trade-off between cost and certainty. Test pits are great because you can see a much broader area. When you do a test pit, it's 3 feet wide by 5, 6, 7 feet wide, and when you go down 10 feet, you're seeing a lot of the soil. You get to see a lot of what's under there, and if it varies a lot, like, we see a small pocket of waste here, and then we see some normal sand and gravel, and then we see some wood ash and coal ash. You get to see a much broader, picture of what's down there. But it creates a lot of disturbance to your surface area, and this is your athletic field. So do you really want to put test pits in your field? You're going to get better information. You're not probably gonna have to do as many of them as you would borings, but you're gonna disrupt your athletic field. So you can backfill with care and try to restore it, but it's not gonna be the same. Whereas a boring, you get a little 3-inch diameter hole, it's easy to patch. Pros and cons.
Now, what if you were to build on the existing footprint?
The existing footprint, there's no reason why you couldn't build on the existing footprint. Oftentimes with schools is you want to start building the new school before you demo the old
Swing
school.
space, sure.
So you can, basically shift everybody over and then go demo. The only concern I'd have with are you gonna match the existing footprint or are you gonna expand the footprint? If you're gonna expand the footprint, RIDE wants to know that you at least do some minimal level of soil vapor evaluation. And the reason why they want that is because despite whatever you got going on in your property, contaminants move in the groundwater. So contaminants can migrate from off-site sources, like the Shell station nearby, for example, is a good example. The cemeteries, if there was a large release of embalming fluids from these cemeteries, it could move along the groundwater and you wouldn't know it until you did a groundwater sample. And the vapors, like formaldehyde is volatile. I'm not sure about the arsenic-bearing compounds, but the gases can move up through the soil and into the building. So RIDE typically wants you to do some sort of evaluation for vapors regardless.
So if the footprint was not changing, there is a mechanism to do some type of soil test of the existing site before you would do any type of demolition?
The soil vapor, that's what you would do, you'd have to do that near there, if you were gonna do that? The soil vapor?
Soil vapor, is a requirement by RIDE. Normally it applies to expanding the footprint, and normally I think it's limited to the knowledge of having an industrial manufacturing or landfill component on the property. Having said that though, RIDE is usually much happier if you do a couple of probes. And basically you just drive those probes down through the basement cement floor and you grab you put a small tube in there and you have a pump on an instrument, pull some air out of there, and you get a reading on your instrument. It tells you about total volatiles. It doesn't tell you what it is under there, but it'll tell you that there's something organic that's volatilized under there. It could be a whole bunch of things.
So Mike, if we were to say, do test pits versus the core drilling, you don't need, it doesn't need to be some specific company that digs the hole, correct? I'm thinking about money savings, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
expensive to bring in the
Town-
drilling rig. I might know a guy who's got an excavator that
Yeah.
might be able to supply us some holes.
Yeah.
So could we do that and save money? And just make sure PAR's on site for the.
We've
sample.
worked with DPWs and town equipment and town personnel in the past to do that, and that does save money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Adam can dig hole.
Again, it creates a disruption on the surface, but it's great because if you have town people doing it, and they have to look at their neighbors the next day about the baseball field.
Put it back together correctly.
They do a better job of patching it up for sure.
Can test pits go as deep as borings though? I mean, you've got to get a pretty big hole to go down 20 feet if you're going to do it.
No, they don't go down as deep. But normally during a construction project, you wouldn't go down that deep either. Usually for a new school, you're concerned about maybe the depth of a basement or for utilities. And as far as the soil assessment goes, we're really kind of only interested in getting down to the natural soil. Once you get down to the natural soil, which even in, some landfills go down pretty deep, and some go up pretty high. They're all different, but generally, probably you guys are right on the coast, so you're limited to how deep you can go because there's the water table.
I was gonna say, in general, if we hit water, we stop.
Right.
Ocean bad.
Well, no, there's high groundwater. I believe there's high groundwater on
Yeah.
the site.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I was curious about when you were talking about the stream and the pond in that front. I was there maybe 4 weeks ago, and it had rained a lot, and there was a lot of water on the site. And so does any of the things that you all did think of, like, assess that, or is that other things that we might need to do in the future as far as like building a school somewhere where there's like a lot of like possible water?
It's not part of the scope of this. There are components on here, like you could use this USGS record to kind of see where the surface elevations are, but it doesn't give you groundwater table elevations.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's an important consideration for any construction project. Inga, you could probably speak to this. Obviously, when you have groundwater, you have to do construction dewatering. That's always a challenge, because you have to find a place to discharge the water. And if you're discharging the water to a river or a municipal system, there's permits to attain, and there's testing to do, and there's costs incurred.
And I think what you're referring to is, it's a bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Today, if you went there, we would joke with Dave, it's his pond.
It's a pond.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
there's
I think that's
these-
because it's a bowl. It's, everything around it is raised up higher.
Yeah.
So it collects in the middle, right in center field, basically.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like you can see like where it shows on the historical ones is where it likes to make a pond, yeah. You have an ice skating rink.
Mike, as far as wetlands, were there any signs of wetlands in the area?
There's plenty of wetlands. You
The whole
got this
city-
pond
the whole
right here in the back. It does look, so one of the things that made us scratch our heads was that the existing schools, leach fields, seems like they were located in the back of the school. And the further east you go, the closer you get to the ocean, the closer you get to this pond, the closer you get to wet areas. You usually don't like to put leach fields in wet areas. And so we were wondering what the wisdom was at the time as to why you get this big open athletic field in the front that's a little higher and a little drier. Why were the leach fields located in the back? Is it because there was a landfill in the front? Maybe. Or maybe the soils out front aren't that amenable to having a leach field there. Or maybe there were other reasons. It's all speculation, but it is curious.
I think, I might be not oriented correctly, but I think that pond that you see there is behind the library. Like when you're in the library looking out the back, that pond is
Yeah,
there.
I think
That pond is a significant distance.
Yeah, there's a
away.
neighborhood in between.
There's a neighborhood in between the back of our school and that pond.
Right.
So
That probably
That's not anywhere near
that probably
So if you
shows
kept-
up on the aerials, I'm sure.
Yeah, if you kept going east.
So here's the school.
Yeah, it's
Here's the
way, it's
neighborhood
much,
here.
It's further.
way-
This
down
looks like it's all.
towards-
This looks like it's wet though. This area
no,
in here.
that's a neighborhood now. And the pond is beyond that, just beyond that,
Yeah,
on the other side of the
yeah,
library.
the big one, yeah.
The other side of the library.
It's actually
When you
closer to
were-
where Wickford Elementary was. That
Yes.
building.
Yeah, when
It's
you
kind
were-
of behind,
Closer to it.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you were talking about the two different leach fields, are those both active or is one?
I think they're all active.
So I can answer that.
Tell me more.
They're both active, so
Yeah.
the main portion of the building, the original portions of the building generate waste to the back of the building, so to the east side of the building, right?
Yeah.
So he showed where it went down, you'll know it by that big ugly shed, it's behind the big ugly shed.
Great reference.
So then, but out front, he showed you a couple of tanks in front of the gym. When they
Oh,
built
they
that
made the
addition
new
to the
one.
gym,
Got
they
it.
built another septic system out front.
Yeah, so
So
there's
that's-
nothing under the baseball field, supposedly, from a leach field perspective. We think the leach fields, where
There is a
those
leach
pictures
field.
were.
There is a leach
There's
field under that,
over
Oh, there is one.
here,
under the softball
and
field.
this trench. These are
Oh, so it
leaching
goes that
trenches.
way from the new part.
Yeah.
We're not sure exactly where these are, but we think they're associated with these tanks. This line is a line that we superimposed on the image.
Okay, that tank is right in the front of the school,
Mhm.
right next to
Yes.
the tree, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's
There's two in the
there's
front
two
of the
down
gym.
here. See these green
Also.
dots?
Yep,
But then
And
and
two
then
up-
there's another
two
one
up
in
here.
front of you, yep.
There's also an elevation, it doesn't show, but there's also a slight elevation change between the softball and baseball field, where the softball field, which is the more southerly field, is up a little bit higher than the baseball.
A little higher. Yeah, and that might explain why this leach field is out there.
Right, and the outfield of the softball field.
Right.
Did anyone reach out to Tim Cranston, the historian? I feel like know if anyone knows
And he
all of
works
the
with
street.
town.
He did mention something about a field at
He
one
said it.
time, I don't remember where we were when he was talking
Yeah.
about it, but a meadow, but I don't have evidence of
The like
any
real
of that.
big dork in me wants to go find out when the town acquired. You know, like who owned the land before? Was it a farm? Was it a whatever? Like it's a really weird amount of land to have in a really, from what I know, like kind of central part of town. Like, you know, it's not like it's out over near Richmond or something. And the curious part of me is curious what was there, but
In our conversations in department head meetings, you know, we've talked about it, Tim's been there, and there's never been any confirmation of any type of landfill. So, like, as you've been saying, it's been hearsay, but there's no confirmation, and you know, right, we don't know, but obviously if there was one, it's before 1930.
Right. So, I mean, and so that's an excellent point. Do you want to spend a lot of time and money and effort investigating or chasing, you know, stories? I think I'd want to put a few, I want to just check that box off, because a landfill is a serious issue, but I don't think you have to go crazy looking for it.
I mean, again, just based on a layperson, based on the many conversations we've had in department head meetings, the people that we've talked to have been in town for years and years and years, your original pictures from 1930s, I feel comfortable, but then your narrative doesn't make me feel as comfortable.
no, that's septic in the back. That's septic in the back narrative.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
it's okay, but you keep
No,
putting
I
out there
Personally, I
that.
tend to go to the worst case, because
Yeah.
that often, you know, when
If I
that pops
just-
up, it's.
If I looked at this
bad
without
news.
you talking, I'd say, wow, this is great news, but then and it's okay, I'm glad you're doing that.
Right.
When you're talking, I'm saying, wow, we really need to check on this, because you don't see anything for 1930, but you keep saying we should check for the landfill.
The other thing that made me nervous was when you were talking about cemeteries, because we've had some issues where I work with buildings and cemeteries and things. And so, as far as where you thought they were, you said it in the past tense at one point. Do you not think they're there now? Or when you were
Well,
talking about the cemetery?
yeah, so we have a cemetery here, right next to the ball field, right on the other side of the
On the
stone
like
wall.
private
On-
not on our property.
On the private property,
Yeah.
right. But right next door. And I would think that the groundwater flow probably tends easterly. I don't know where the drainage points are out here, but, yeah, it could cut across your property. It might bleed a little bit depending on the, if this is a higher ground than over here. There might be a northeasterly component, I'm not sure. Until I would do the wells, but yeah. The problem, and I don't know how old this cemetery is, but it looks like it's pretty old. Here's a picture of that area. And then later on in the USGS, you'll see they label them. Right here, it shows it on the other side of the road. And it shows one up here, and then it shows this whole series. So,
It's not that
That's
one.
where the church is.
It's
so
not where
this-
Samuel Boone Yard Cemetery is. I think it's that one.
the Samuel Yard Cemetery, the one that we photographed, we thought was right here, based on some records that we looked up. Now, it's not uncommon sometimes to move cemetery plots and reinsure.
But where
That's under
where
the
you're
church.
showing it, exactly,
Yeah.
where you're showing it is directly under a church.
No, there is a cemetery there, I can tell you.
Really?
My daughter did a Girl Scout project looking for old cemeteries.
Okay, I'm
and
gonna
it
need
is
a-
very
I'm gonna
small
need a Girl
cemetery
Scout.
beyond the
So-
church,
There you go.
yes.
Okay,
So, yeah,
that's
so-
that one.
It would make sense if there was a church there.
Yeah.
Churches often had cemeteries in the backyard. But yeah, why it shows over here at this point, but I'm not sure what this square is, because they have the Captain George plot up here, and they have a square over here, and they have these squares. So these squares look like they're associated with the cemeteries, but this one's, why so far away from the text? And I don't know, this one isn't where we thought it was, so I don't know if this reflects some sort of change or not. It just seems a little screwy, so. I didn't draw this.
So a concern I have is that with the number of above ground and below ground storage tanks, the septic system, leach fields, all in the area where we're looking to build a new school, possibly, we haven't made that decision yet.
Right.
And I'm sensing a lot of concern from you that we should do further studies of that field before we do anything else.
Well, and this is a risk management a decision, and everybody kind of manages risks. You know, there are books on how to
I wouldn't
manage
want
your
the
risk.
school department to be
but-
putting out a lot of money,
Right,
into something that we find out can't happen.
exactly.
That's- to me,
And
that's
that's
just
what I,
a waste of time,
so
money,
this is
effort.
one of those things where there might be a low probability, but if it were true, it would have a big impact.
Yeah.
So, to me, in my way of measuring risk, and just so you know, I'm pretty conservative when it comes to managing risks, you know. I'm more comfortable with my money in a CD than in the stock market. Although I do invest in both. But yeah, you know, I would wanna know, I think, before I spend any more money, what the situation. If I'm planning on putting the building out here in this athletic field, me personally, I wanna know. How you guys manage your risk and your money is up to you guys. You know. In the back, you had those, let me see if I can get to the current conditions. In the back, you did have leach fields, grease trap, the ASTs. So if you were gonna expand the building out this way, and this is the down gradient end, so you're not gonna get away from this landfill. This is truly a landfill. The leachate and the groundwater impacts are moving downstream, so again, I think I'd wanna rule that out. But I wouldn't go crazy. I would spend a day, no more than a day with test pits, and maybe no more than 5. If you're comfortable with that number. If you wanna know for sure, I mean, you gotta dig up the whole field to know for sure.
And that's a test pit, not a boring.
Test pit, not a barn.
And you said test pits would end up causing more damage to the athletic field than a boring.
So from an environmental science point of view and an assessment point of view, test pits give me a much better picture of the subsurface. And I don't care about your athletic field. I mean, no offense to anybody, but I'm not using your athletic field. You guys are. So if you want to use the athletic field and you're worried about test pits, you go with borings. But I'm not going to see as much with a boring. Like pros and cons. But you can patch up a test pit.
Right.
You can patch up a test pit really good. You can't tell it was over there if you do it right.
Bob, I'm gonna make a mess and you'll have to clean it up. So I'm gonna make a statement. We could technically dig our test pits on either side of an actual playing surface.
Exactly, you do it out in the center field of both, because that's the majajority of where the building is gonna be.
We could
And
make
then
sure
just
that your
grade
actual
it, clean
playing
it,
surface is.
Put them down and put
is
grass
untouched.
back.
You don't touch that.
I mean, that's-
It, there's nothing stopping you guys from doing that with or without a professional consultant. You know,
They have-
see what you see. And I mean, if you're not comfortable with what you're seeing or you don't know what you're looking at, then you bring somebody in. But, you know, if you dig a hole there and it's nothing but beautiful beach sand, you don't need a professional to tell you there's not a landfill there, you know.
I think you'll find somebody else,
Guys,
somebody that wouldn't.
if they were doing the test pits in that area just for the landfill purposes, is there any efficiency also doing something, maybe just a boring near the leach fields to see how much contamination is existing there? Is that an area that they just should never touch? Or-
I wouldn't say you should never touch it. I guess it depends on, are the leach fields likely to be as big a problem as a landfill? Certainly not. Are you gonna disturb those
Something you should
areas?
know?
I would say, if you know for sure you're gonna be digging in that area, yes, absolutely. I would say you definitely need that. Before you go to construction, you're gonna wanna know that. Before you go to bid, you're gonna wanna know that information. Do you wanna know it now? I don't know. Like I said, if you go dig a hole there and you see there's a big landfill there, you know, I would start to think about another place to build a school. I wouldn't worry about the leach fields, you know, who cares about the leach fields at that point, you know?
Right.
With the number of underground storage tanks, I know initially there had been some talk about putting the school in the current athletic field and then building some type of athletic field back on where the existing school is. With those leaching fields and all the underground storage tanks and stuff,
and the
would
water.
there have to be a significant amount of remediation to put a playing field back there?
No, this would be a, well, if you grab the sample, and this is another reason why you might not want to grab a sample. If you grabbed the sample and there was a problem there, now you have to deal with it. If you're not gonna disturb those leach fields, and there's no breakouts, and there's no obvious problem to address, there's no drinking water supplies, There's no area, and all you're gonna do is put an athletic field on top of them. You're not displacing any soils, you're not subjecting the construction workers to this stuff. Just leave it be and build your field. But if you need drainage, you know, for your athletic field, and you need to put some trenches in there, and you put a trench in there, you put a pipe in there, that means you're gonna displace soil. Now you're gonna have construction guys exposed to it, you're gonna have displaced soil to manage, then yeah, I'd wanna know. But if you're not gonna bother, and you're just gonna pave over it, not pave over it, but turf over it, have at it.
There would be some displacement though, tearing down the old school.
Yes, but that would just be
So-
a regular demolition project, and you'd still have to worry about, there are environmental concerns associated with the building, asbestos, lead paint, PCBs, all that stuff. But, you're not necessarily worried about the septic field so much, unless you wanted to get rid of them, unless you wanted, or you had to, I don't know. In Massachusetts, they have, regulations relative to closing leach fields, I'm a Massachusetts guy. But I'm not sure what the Rhode Island regs are relative to underground injections.
And
Including,
just for clarification, they're on, the USTs are gone. The USTs that were in the northwest corner, right? They've been removed.
right, I think he was talking about the
and
septic
with
tanks.
no concerns back in 2006.
Right,
So it's really just leach fields that we're
Right.
concerned with.
the septic tank and the leach field.
Right.
Yeah,
But not
the
UST.
cesspools too.
So we need to look into the Rhode Island law about what
Closure
happens with those
of the
closures.
leach fields, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, I know I gave you guys a lot to think about, so. It's a lot. But if you just take it in small pieces, it's more manageable. My big concern would be, is there any truth to these landfill stories? Then worry about what you're gonna do for your construction.
And if I could just summarize what I think I heard, so in all the research that you've done, and all the research you've showed us, you can't find any indication of there potentially or possibly ever being a landfill. However, because of the rumors that you're hearing, you feel it would be prudent, and I agree, I'm sure we all agree, prudent to just confirm that. But you
Right.
can't find any indication, other than a rumor, you can't,
I
if you
didn't-
never heard the rumor,
Right.
you wouldn't even be looking at that.
Right, absolutely not,
Okay,
absolutely not. yeah.
but obviously we gotta follow
Right.
through.
You know, in the beginning, I explained to you what goes into a phase one, and, let's see, it included, included historic records, and interviews with facility and local officials. And so this part of this local officials, this also includes, to the degree that you hear from the public, that goes into the equation. As you can see in my report, I didn't identify it as an REC, I didn't identify it as de minimis. We looked at it, we evaluated it, we looked at the historical record, and our conclusion was probably not. But I don't know, that doesn't give you a warm fuzzy if you're about to go on to $1 million, renovation project or a school project.
That was great advice, I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah, yeah.
confirm that, other than those interviews, you wouldn't even brought up the word landfill.
Right,
Perfect.
absolutely,
Thank
absolutely
you.
not.
That's perfect.
When we're
Yeah.
close.
But I'm glad you're doing that, so.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any other questions they want to ask Mike? Anyone from the public have any questions?
Thank you.
All right, great.
Thank
Well, you
you
guys
very
have
much.
my contact information is on the slide presentation and on the business cards, so anything comes up, give a shout.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will be in touch.
Great.
For sure.
So, maybe I didn't get into it, but the next step would be to figure out what you want to do for additional investigations. And then, like I was saying before, if that's gonna be your guys digging a hole out in the field to give you some sort of comfort level, then that's your phase two.
But that seems to be a recommendation, that to do a test pit or borings, but preferably a test pit in the front before you do anything else, because why even look at anything else if you find something there?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And then when you get closer to design and you know exactly where you're gonna be displacing soils, we can find out what those conditions are. And just to put everybody get this on record, in Rhode Island, Rhode Island is notorious for soils having arsenic levels above a recommended safe threshold. Naturally occurring arsenic, it's everywhere. It's predominantly along the Blackstone Valley area, but there are large deposits on Aquidneck Island, otherwise known as Newport, and Middletown and Portsmouth, I think?
Isn't your office on Blackstone Valley?
We're up north, we're in Lincoln. Yes, oh yeah, our street name is Blackstone Valley Place.
It was a joke.
Yeah, so, yeah, there are naturally occurring arsenic levels, and if you have naturally occurring arsenic levels here on your site, you need special controls. You have to worry about the waste management, where's that soil gonna go? The health and safety of the workers has to be considered, and you have to worry about the dust in your surrounding neighborhoods. But if the arsenic is below the threshold, then you're okay, but I can't tell without doing a soil sample.
And when we do test pit or the borings, is it recommended that someone from PAR is on site while we're doing that work?
I'd love to say that, you know, it'd be great to have a professional there. I don't know that you need one. I would say if you see something, call us in and we can maybe do it on a time materials basis. Try to limit your costs. But if you want to take advantage of the hole being open to grab some samples to see what you're up against, naturally occurring arsenic, the hole's open, you know, might as well only disturb it once, get a quick sample. But, you know, then we could talk about, you know, a day's worth of labor or something to that effect.
And you think one test pit would be enough in the front?
I didn't say that.
That's my question.
I heard
What
three.
would be your recommendation?
I heard 4 or 5.
So, okay.
I
That's
said
what I was
the
asking.
number is a function of the degree of confidence that you want. If
Okay.
you want to know for sure what the conditions are there, you have to turn over the whole field. You know, if you feel like this landfill business is maybe as much an urban myth as it is anything else, it's not real, one should be enough. You know, you guys pick the number that you're comfortable with. You know?
All right.
You know, you'll know sooner. You'll know somewhere down the road what the reality is. You'd rather know it sooner than later.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
That's a good job, Mike.
I do have a question. When you cite the school, is that only a function of where you can fit it in, or does RIDE have other requirements as to how you have to cite it? Like with relation to energy concerns?
So when we're looking at where it's going on that, we're looking at the best footprint layout on the land, the available land that we have to build on.
Okay, with no other concerns?
Not that,
Just where it fits and you can get your
as,
athletic.
right, where it fits, as long as there's no environmental concerns or any other concerns with the land, where we're
Are you
placing.
thinking about like solar, like positioning, Mary? Where you going?
Yeah, like daylighting and
Well,
how you
that-
orient the building.
Right, so
Yeah,
they would.
I think they would take that into
Right, they would-
consideration.
Exactly, they're gonna
Yeah,
take that
yeah.
into consideration, and they're also gonna consider where they're putting solar panels on top of the building as well. And making sure that that
That's a good point.
layout of the roof is in an area where it's gonna get the most light during the
Yeah.
daytime. They would also
Some
look, they would
those-
also consider looking around too in that area, looking at the trees and the woods. You know, there's not much right there on that field where we would have to take down any trees or cut back any of that area, but that would be looked at as well.
Just with the construction bills now up in the house, it seems that they're going to be more, with new construction, more concerned about making sure you get the best energy
Right,
efficient.
and we'd be looking to making sure that, you know, any new build is, we're getting, you know, make sure it's an energy efficient building.
Thanks.
Welcome. Any other comments from anyone else regarding this study and next steps? I think it was kind of clear as far as what our next steps need to be, but anyone else have anything to add to that or questions for us to discuss?
Should we be providing a recommendation to the school committee as far
I
as the
would,
next steps?
I would say, I think that yes, we should do that. We do have, on here, you know, discussion of possible action. But I would say that if anyone is against us moving forward with, either doing the borings or the test pit, I mean, that was very clearly stated that we should be doing that before we do any other work or any other architectural design work.
So in your
we should
opinion,
note that.
would it be an appropriate action for the committee tonight to make a motion to send a recommendation to the school committee for the school department to work with Public Works to look into potential test pits and or borings? Adam?
Can I jump in real quick to just mention something, and Bob, you might be able to help me out? The location of this proposed school might dictate where we wanna dig. That could be the only cross where we wouldn't wanna dig before some
Like a
type
chicken
of,
egg kind of thing.
some type of building size or dimensions or location would be. Make sense?
Yeah, I would just think, we know it's going
We
in the
do
front.
have, yeah,
And I think if we pick four spots in the front, where we want it, however we figure it,
Okay.
we're gonna get that answer. The answer we're looking for, was there some sort of a salvage yard? I've heard numerous things, train stations, a million, we wanna confirm that, right? So if we did 4 test pits out front, the building's gonna take up almost that whole front area. We saw a
I was
partial
gonna say,
layout
we
back
have
in the
some
day, right?
layouts that we can
Yeah,
look at,
they-
and we could get some of that information from Perkins too,
Right.
as far as the
Yeah,
size
and
of,
then
you know,
just-
what
yeah, when we were looking at trying to put the combined school at that site, they drew where the footprint would be, where the athletic field would be, and where the parking would be, so I think it would change slightly if we decided to just do a smaller
smaller.
facility there, but it would be generally, I think, the same spot,
Yeah,
because
so
they
we have a
marked
lot of
like,
that.
yeah, so we definitely have some of that.
And I would think that we probably wanna do something like, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I would think that we wanna do this in the summer. School's out, you dig them up, you can plant it back, by
Right.
the fall, by September, it's pretty much back to its normal condition at best. And the kids are playing out with soccer and with softball, so
You mean-
I'm assuming that you'd wanna, what's that? Oh, please.
Just timing wise, I don't think it's waiting till the summer,
I
if
was
we're
gonna say,
trying
we
to
might
move
wanna do
forward
that
for
earlier.
November.
While the kids are in school? Okay.
I think depending on the size, I
Yeah.
think we could look at that and play it out.
Well,
And
let's,
so-
so
and so
if I
just-
may, just allow, so that's a great segue into something we should talk about, so, because that's a good point, Aaron. So, if we're talking about November, I wanna let the committee know that, we need to, because I made some phone calls in the last 48 hours, we need to get a recommendation to the school committee, who then needs to get it to the town council, who then needs to go to the general assembly for enabling legislation. I know the general assembly is looking to get out by mid-June.
Yeah, we already timelined it out, I can get you the date, give me a
Do
second.
you know
I'll
when the
pull it
general
up.
assembly
Yeah.
will take it?
The
The general assembly has told you when they'll accept enabling
Well,
legislation?
we checked in with some folks about what the last date might be that
What
would be
did
able
they
to
tell
go
you?
to them. Let me look it up, I had it in a document that the school committee looked at a month or so ago. Just give me you all can keep talking, I'll
Yeah,
find it.
what did you find out from the phone calls you needed to?
So, you're not gonna wanna go to the general assembly much, I mean, they'll do us a favor, us the town, and you're not gonna get to go there much later than early May. And if Aaron has something
I
different,
think,
that's
yeah, I
great.
think I had it April in my,
Okay. But
docs,
and
so.
April is the date, that
Yeah.
is exact, April is the date, but I think we could push them to early May. That's the impression I got from leadership at the State House, but April is the correct, Aaron's right, it is April.
Or it might, yeah, let me,
But they will push it to early May. The problem is that, you know, the town council schedule and the school committee schedule, and I know that we may need a special council meeting for this, so I just wanna throw that out there because we may want to act
I
relatively
was gonna
quickly.
say, if we take that date, let's work back.
no, we already did it, yeah. I just pulled it up, hold on. Did you wanna say something first?
Nope, you can keep doing that, you can keep looking.
No, I got it.
I'm just gonna say, if we dig test pits, it's not for weeks. It's open it for a day,
Exactly.
close it right after you're done. So we're not gonna have kids falling in hole, I just don't want anybody to have this impression that we'll have these 4 giant holes for a long period of time.
I was
We're gonna
more-
open it and close it,
I
open
was
it.
more concerned with the fact that after you close it, is still, can the kids still use it?
Yeah, we'll get it,
Great.
we'll get it level and, you know, we won't have grass on it when we're done, it will be raked out so there's no stone. But
Yeah, 'cause we need,
You do,
yeah.
Physical education's
We're gonna
out
try
there.
us in 2 weeks, so.
Yeah, that's,
right, so
I
it's, but we gotta pick our battles.
I just need like a big, like 20 acres of land that's empty.
Yeah.
That'd be way better.
And I do wanna say,
I'm just saying.
I would like to say that I would like
Great if we could.
par on
Right.
site for the test pits.
Adam mentioned the same thing.
Yeah, I don't wanna go and Adam and I said, oh, it looks great, I'd rather have professionals send reports so everybody at the table
Yeah, you
is
want
happy
people
with the
taking
answers.
pictures, you want people taking videos.
Plus they'll have all the information they need for
Yeah, for the
design,
future.
loading, and
Right.
whatever, I mean, who knows, what if we did find something and we have to keep going? They're
Right.
gonna say, keep going, they're gonna force us to do more.
We also need to know the cost too.
Yep.
What is that cost going to be in doing this work and having park there?
So I would say to go back to Ralph's question, I would, if depending on what the committee feels, if that is the recommendation for the next step, I would have a official recommendation from this committee go up to the school committee, because then that will allow the administration to get some of that fiscal impact that we'll be asking questions about. But I think that having a recommendation from the group that saw this presentation would be helpful for the school committee. Rob and I obviously can convey some things, but I think having you all say, yes, this is probably the best next step is very helpful.
So, I would suggest anyway that the motion is in order to send a recommendation to the school committee that the school department and the town work together immediately to begin a plan for test pits at the Whitford Middle School site. However, that they both work with the Whitford Middle School administration, because while I know we have to pick our battles, I would hate for us to do something that would have a dramatic effect on the last few months of the Whitford Middle School season. So I'd like to at least work with them to make sure that we can eliminate that possible impact. I'm sure there's gonna be a way.
They can run over to Wilson, right?
Well, and I do know from a conversation I had with the athletic director today, that they don't play games at that site, it's
Yeah.
mostly used for practice.
Okay, good.
Well, softball, please.
We of course want minimal impact to the students, of course.
So I think
We
that's,
want to make sure that we have power on site.
Adam wants that, I
Yeah.
think Bob wants
Just
that.
want to make sure that's it. I didn't hear that
I
in
would
the
put that in the
motion,
motion,
but I just
yeah.
want to make sure we have that in the
I
motion.
was gonna put that, but then you had mentioned about cost, so I just
Yeah.
sat back.
No, I don't.
Well, but that's where I think the recommendation of what's best from the building subcommittee should give recommendations based on what is best building wise. Then the school committee, with advice of the finance department and whatnot, the administration can say, oh, that's great, and that we agree with that, but we can't afford it, or whatever. But I think you all can say whatever is best, and then we can work through it from there.
You want to amend it? And then-
Absolutely. So I amend my motion that the recommendation also have the fact that we recommend power on site while this is happening.
Second?
Second. Any discussion?
Keep in mind that it's gonna be very wet weekend.
Oh, we're not that
That's
fast.
very rush with this thing because rain and rain and rain.
That's all it does.
It's March. Okay. All
Is
in-
there any point in saying that this is to just look to see evidence of a landfill stop? That we're not looking for other things, that we're not, I don't know, I'm trying to, I guess, anticipate things going sideways. But that's the point of this, right? Is
Correct.
just to see if there's any evidence of a landfill.
Correct.
That's it, we're not looking for.
Well, any evidence,
arsenic or
any
nothing-
evidence.
Nothing else, so this is just a landfill.
Yes.
It's any evidence of a landfill or things that would need remediation. So I don't know what else that would be, but that I think it's looking to see if this site is going to be extremely expensive or take a really long time too. And I think the landfill is probably the biggest one, but
He's also
It's-
mentioned to do the soil testing.
Yeah.
So if PAR is there.
That's what I was
we
saying.
see
While
if
we're
there's
digging it
some
up.
Soil testing.
To
so
save
we know if there's any
funds.
vapors or any
yeah.
contaminants.
But that wouldn't, those, and PAR recommended that, and that wouldn't be a deal breaker. The
No,
landfill
no,
would be a
just
deal
like you
breaker.
have a better
The others
idea.
would be just slight remediation, so.
I mean, a landfill, you just be expensive to
Yeah.
fix it. You could, but you can fix anything.
Yeah.
It's just-
Okay, to call the vote? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is to review the March 5th school committee discussion on Perkins Eastman feasibility study. And so we just wanted to make sure we briefed everyone on the proposal and what was approved by the school committee. Everyone received the proposal in the email attached to the agenda. So we did provide this to, do you want to review this, just because you, or I can continue doing it, so, I mean, this is, yeah, I can keep going now. So we did request from Perkins Eastman to have a proposal so we can look at renovations of the two middle schools, what that cost would be. We know that was a big question within the community. We wanted to be able to provide that answer and information as we move forward in looking at what the possible project could be regarding a middle school. So with renovations, expansion, as needed to meet programs of existing schools to meet 21st century learning and teaching environments. And we also requested what the cost would be for designs of replacement of the existing schools with new facilities on the existing school sites. So that was the proposal. The cost for those proposed professional fees, we had them break it down in 4 options so we could see what it would be for renovations, what it would be to build a new school for each, and each option costs $13,750. We brought that to school committee. School committee approved to do all 4 options moving forward, and that way we get the information provided to us of what it would entail as far as designing it, plus the cost to renovate both Davisville Middle School, renovate Whitford Middle School, and then in addition to build a new Davisville and a new Whitford. We did use the student projections that we had from the looking at flow analytics, and we used the lower number there because that aligns closely to what our current population is in looking at NSDEC projections as well. So we did look at, like 475 to 500 student population in each building if we were to have that. We want to make sure there's room as well. We don't want to, build a new school and then it not be large enough for the future as well. So the proposal does provide what the deliverables will be in getting the work done. And they're estimated to complete this work in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So, it will be a month to a month and a half before we do get anything to bring back to the building committee and the school committee to review. Any questions or
Great news.
comments?
So the test pits should be done before they do this?
So-
Or,
I heard that as well.
okay.
That's what I was gonna ask. I imagine that some of this proposal may just fly completely out of the window.
Well, because if we do the test pits and find out that you can't use the land,
Right.
then we could say, okay,
Don't do the new one there.
we don't need,
We don't need to go any further?
Well, you could still
We
do
can still-
the renovation one at
we
WRS,
could find out
or
renovation, but if
you
you can't
could-
build on the land, then
you could knock down that building and build a new one there. It
Could.
stinks. There's still options,
we'd have to
but
identify
they're
some
less fun.
space and,
Yeah.
Where's there a building? We don't have a building necessarily in town, is there a building nearby that, in another district that we would be able to send to students? We'd have to, have all that information too, so.
Yeah, the school committee really grappled with the different pieces, but based on where we landed with the bond last November, and also wanting to provide as much information as possible. We felt, I think the consensus, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, is that having all of those different options kind of fleshed out leaves less questions about what's the best path forward, and can give us a really accurate apples to apples comparison of what it would cost to do something new versus renovate a facility, because I know we knew that was a big conversation, but then also, kind of helping folks understand the cost differentials between one school, 2 schools, et cetera, et cetera. So just trying to get as much information as possible. And even though it's frustrating to have to spend the finances to kind of get those plans, we felt that it was the best path forward for the town in trying to make a decision about what might be best as far as the middle schools in town, so. And just to clarify that date, so I believe the town council has a meeting on April 29th.
You do.
And so depending on what the folks up at the State House would say, in theory, you could probably vote on bond language that time, or we would need to do a special one prior to that. And so that would be the last date I think you would want to get that language over, but even a little bit earlier. But the way that the town council's schedule is, they have because of the budget hearings and different things, they have a big gap.
Exactly.
So it's gonna be a tight fit, because if it's gonna take 4 to 6 weeks for them to get us, for Perkins Eastman to get us these options, that takes us to mid-April already, at least.
And that is assuming, and I.
If everything goes well.
No, right, and that is assuming, just for the building committee's purpose, that is assuming that we go forward with a November question rather than a special election. I can tell you that the council is very interested in a November election. I think we all should be, because we get the biggest turnout. I know the council's also interested in having the question address some immediate needs, and the superintendent and I have talked about this, the immediate needs of the school department, at least for the next 24 months. Even if you had something small that we can tackle for the next 24 months and a middle school. So that, again, that's what I'm hearing from the council. I wanted to share that with the building committee, but I think we all agree if there's any way to get this out for November, bonuses or not, you get the biggest turnout, and I think that's a good move for all of us. So it is a tight time frame, very tight. I mean, I'd have to talk to bond counsel. I mean, remember that we're getting enabling legislation. So that means that enables us to put a bond question. So we could go forward with enabling legislation for a plan, and then you don't have to do that. So it enables you to, let's say you had the enabling legislation to put a bond question on for a new middle school and renovations up to 100 million. You could still put a question on that said renovations for 30 million. And you'll meet the nature of the law. It doesn't have, so as long as it's up to, you couldn't say 101
You
million.
could go backwards. but
Yes,
you-
so if we're in a real tight time frame, we can come up with recommend to the school committee and the council to come up with a plan that, you know, we will like enable legislation for, I'm just throwing this out there, a middle school of 450 students and $40 million of renovations for the next 36 months, not to exceed 110 million. And then we have right up until the time to send to the Secretary of State for the question to come up with a plan.
Is that 60 days before?
I think it might be, oh yeah, that's about right, that's about right, because you have to wait for the primary. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Jeanette will tell us it's August, because we're doing the same thing with the public safety complex, but we don't need enabling legislation for that. So we would say the end of August.
And the stage one we submitted in February is good enough to cover this new building. So I know stage one's more broad,
Yes, yep.
so. okay.
It's not till stage 2 where you actually define what the project,
So that would have to be submitted in
September
September.
15th.
Yeah.
September or February. Because you have up to a year.
Oh, okay.
We were targeted the 6 months if there were bonuses to apply, correct, Inga?
September 15th. Otherwise, you have to resubmit stage 1 again. Then February. So if
You don't have 1 year from stage 1?
You could just submit the same stage one.
They go on
Stage
segue.
one
So
now,
like
then have to go
this one you
stage two.
resubmitted your stage 1.
Mhm.
You're gonna submit on your stage 2 September 15th. If you don't, then you can ask for extension based that you know on different reasons, and they'll probably grant an extension, and you can probably do February 15th, or you have to literally re-sign and resubmit the stage 1 again, and then you get to February 15th. So it's a choice.
And just, I want to talk to bond, I'll get back to the committee, I want to talk to bond council on what I just said, because I'm trying to think that they do approve the actual question. So that's gonna bother me a little bit, because I know it's up to 100 million, but they do approve the question, so, I'll get back to everybody, and I want to talk to Dave Farrar on that.
And can it only be up to 100?
They approve the question, so that's the maximum you can go up to, but I think that's more of an expenditure. Once they approve the question, I think that's what goes on the ballot. So I have to, I'm walking back what I just said now that I think about how that works. You don't have to spend it.
Yeah,
The plan doesn't have to be there, but that will still be
they
the
have to
question.
vote on it.
That will still be the question, yes.
That's what I
Yeah,
didn't want
no,
to
you're
correct you,
right. No,
but
thank you. So that would be so the question would still be the same, we just don't have to go forward with
we
it.
need to know what we're doing in April, but we
Yes.
don't have to
Yes.
spend it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna walk that back.
You do that though, and also, and then, you know, I think you think about the next steps too, so if you don't hit November, then you're talking a special election again, and that has a much lower, you know, turnout, and we saw what happened there, and it's also an expense to the town and effort on the employees, and then, or you're waiting until 2026, you know, like it's, that's what that's why we have to, I think, keep pushing, because I don't wanna, every month you wait, you're setting it back possibly years, and that's just more time students are in a couple of facilities that are just not acceptable, so.
You wanna set our next meeting before we end?
Can I ask a question that, in terms of, everyone does, want to have a lot of these things answered, but are we gonna end up in the same point where they don't know what the answers are? What is being done in terms of the plan, in terms of getting the information out in a better way than last time, so that the public really does know what's going on, and they do know the findings.
So we need to share with this report, right, so we have this report now, and so we need to share the report out, right? And we can share information from what came out of this committee and put that out there so people are aware of that and what those next steps are. Right? I think, you know, they need to know what we're talking about here as far as our next steps, information that we're gathering and sharing that out, getting it out there. You know, we have, you know, some of our meetings, we've talked again about how to get stuff out to the entire town. We are limited as a school department because, you know, we can send it to our school families, we can put it on our social media, but getting it out throughout the town, we'd have to work with the town as far as how we can share it out even further.
That just seems imperative. Still talking to people, saying there were no plans, talking about the Quidnesset site, you know, still, and still harboring bad feelings about it all. So that just seems imperative. And do I understand that the bonus incentives are totally gone? There's,
Well, they are expected to expire at the end
Right.
of
right,
June.
in terms of
So-
an extension,
So extension,
another-
we haven't had where we know that there's possibly some work happening in, you know, with the legislators, but in General Assembly, we don't have any information yet as far as if that's going to go further or not, so I don't think that's something we can,
No, townsfolk could,
you know.
people could
expect
definitely,
that, so.
communicate with their, you know, House and state representatives though, as citizens of the town, if they wanted that's at that level, so that's where I think the community, if they are hoping for those extensions or for people to kind of get onto that, that's where the community can be a huge help with reaching out to their elected officials, would be my
And
opinion.
would that be like our reps? Anyone at the,
Both,
at
right? All four.
Ride or?
Okay.
Yeah, I would
It would be the
focus,
four
Yeah.
rep,
I would focus on the reps, but I
Yep.
think it looks good in the Senate.
yeah, House and Senate.
So our next school committee meeting is March 19th. I'm just bringing that up because if we're gonna bring the, motion that we approved tonight to school committee, that'd be the 19th for approval for, funding to do the work to have PAR there on site. We could pre-plan, right, with the town and PAR as far as getting a date tentatively assigned for
Like the
that work.
20th?
And then that way on the 19th, depending on how that vote goes,
Exciting.
we could start that right away. Because we don't wanna then wait 2-3 weeks out from there, because then they won't be about.
The school committee is always
At
happy
least for middle schools, so.
although we don't like it, we are always happy to call a quick special meeting as needed if it's holding up the administration and doing their work. So I don't, if we can pre-schedule the work, that seems reasonable to me, but if there is need, we are always
Yes,
willing to do that.
Right, I think
That's a
that,
good,
you know,
that's a very good idea.
make sure that's scheduled, so then
Yeah.
You have to
that
allow
would
it to
get
professional-
done.
Get the lab to professional. as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So we can't just dump it on them and expect them to
Yeah,
be there.
yeah,
So I think that works.
I think that.
And I would
that's
schedule a
that
meeting
one.
for the following week, I don't know if we'd have answers, but I think we need to meet so we can start discussing possible bond language.
Mhm.
Right, I think we need to have some options of what that will be, so we're ready to go, because that brings us to the last week of March.
Mhm.
And this, I mean, I think for this subcommittee, the building subcommittee, it's what are we building, right? What's the best choice for that? I think the school committee would technically do the bond language, but we,
Right, but
like,
we
we need the recommendation
right, we
from
need
this committee of what are we
recommendations
building?
from
What do we
folks,
wanna, pursue? Yeah, 100%.
We
So
won't
my-
know until we get this report though, right?
I was gonna say, am I correct in that we're
Yeah.
putting Perkins on hold for,
Not everything, I think,
but for the new building at Wickford?
right.
So we move ahead with 3
So
options.
we want the existing, we wanna know what the cost will be to renovate.
So if
I would
we're
just go
not
for it.
getting test pits
Immediately.
until
No, I would just do all four.
towards,
That's my opinion. Just go, just roll the dice a little bit. I also like to put my money in CDs, but sometimes you gotta roll the dice. I would just do all four. you know, other people can disagree, that's just my opinion from my perspective on the subcommittee, but I feel like if we need to know, if like it sounds like there's a teeny small likelihood that there's a landfill there. I think we should do the stuff, but I don't think we should hold up the drawings and whatnot to wait for that small chance that it might not be usable.
And maybe we let Perkins know that whatever they're looking at may have to go in the existing footprint versus in the field. Because where I was going with this is I have concerns over timeline.
Yeah.
If we hold Perkins until we get test pit.
Yeah, I'm saying don't hold.
'Cause didn't the school committee already vote to move forward?
Yes.
It's all for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so, okay, so that's a good, so that's a
We
good
do
thing.
the money,
So,
Right.
I'm just-
so good.
So do we wanna say, I don't know, Tuesday, March 26th, how does that look for everyone?
So if we were to do that, what would be the agenda item?
I would say we start
Results.
on that, we're looking at discussing what, we would be recommending as far as
Mr. Mancini?
building proposals.
I think that's a good, because you and I think a lot's gonna happen over the next week or so with the council meetings, with the department head sessions and so, and talk about capital. Something needs to go on the November question, so.
Right.
So you think that would be, we would discuss that night,
I would say that's what we need to be doing at that point.
as far as what we wanna do with capital.
Both the capital and as far as to the building of the new middle school,
Mhm.
right? We still need to know, are we going to recommend a consolidated middle school, or are we recommending two middle schools? And I think we need to come forward on that night with more information of,
And I agree with you
Even if
100%.
Perkins studies aren't complete.
That was my question. I agree with you 100%. I guess my
I
point
think we
is
need to
that,
start having that conversation, right? We may not have a definite answer, but we know what the feeling is of this.
Do we have a
Subcommittee,
timeline
so-
for the Perkins study?
4 to
Yes,
6
4 to
weeks.
6 weeks.
because I agree 100%. My only question is what information will we have that night that we don't have tonight?
Alright, we can do things fast.
Maybe the test pits, maybe.
Maybe the test bits, and we possibly could have some of this information. We
Okay.
can work with Perkins tomorrow
Okay.
and
Even if-
let them know, like, you know, we have a meeting on the 26th.
Then I'm
and it can
asking
be
them-
reduced by that.
I'm only asking the question because if we think that on April 2nd we would have it rather than the
Yeah, you
26th,
pushed it.
then we push, that's the only reason I'm asking the question.
No,
I agree with you 100% that has to be the agenda
Yeah,
item.
and we
But
could,
if you
and
feel
and
that's-
we could, yeah, we could do that. If we think we're not gonna have as much information for then we could. So why don't we hold, if we could,
And I actually have another idea that may
26th
help
and 2nd.
move it.
So the second is a great night, because every other night that week is a problem, except that is the presidential primary. I don't think that's a problem
And
though.
we have school committee that night.
You do? Second?
Yeah.
Yes.
What time?
We have school committee at 6 o'clock, so we
It's,
could
we're
always-
flexible
we
with
could
the
always-
time.
We could always meet before if we
That's
need
what I
to.
would think.
I'd be happy to adjust the time of the school committee meeting to accommodate this group if need be.
So I think we should close off for ourselves the 26th and the 2nd for possible meetings,
Then we can cancel.
and leave that in your hands as to what you think the better date is. So as we're getting so you know that for the 26th, you would have to put it to the Secretary of State's by the
Friday.
22nd. So by the 22nd, you think the committee can have, you make the determination as to whether you think it's the 26th or the 2nd. And I have complete
And
confidence that.
we'll have conversations so we can know that as a
Perfect.
month later, so.
That's a very good point.
Related to the state, if Perkins was able to deliver us chunks, what would this committee's preference be as to, you know, let's say it's 4 weeks and they can do a study a week. What would the preference be of like, what order would we wanna get studies? Would it be, you know, our top priority is to see what a renovation at Wickford would look
I
like?
would say the two,
Two renos first?
the Reno and the new build of Wickford Middle School.
So Wickford is our priority site, and then if they're able to give it to.
I would say that's the
chunk,
priority, especially just looking at that land and.
Okay. So I can make that request.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yes.
This isn't completely self-serving, but one thing that Mike Flynn said, to give you a comfort level about scheduling the test pits sooner rather than later, he said something like, to the fact that it would be like time and labor for a day to have somebody from FAR on site. And while they're open, get a couple of canisters that are gonna go to him, and then you can be able to fill them back in. So I don't think that the cost for PAR is gonna be very high, so just, if that makes you more comfortable as far as scheduling, digging the hole, so.
Thank
I'll
you.
leave that to.
And I think, I think someone had mentioned with the Whitford Middle School folks, like I would, if there's dates that are absolute no-goes due to like pre-scheduled tryouts for XYZ, like making sure that Mr. Waterman's aware of those so that they're not accidentally booking something that's gonna negatively impact the kids.
Yeah, I'll talk to you.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect.
And Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got 326 and 4-2. We'll hold that evening. These meetings have started at 6 o'clock before, but if we do on 4-2, it might be earlier, around 5 o'clock. We'll have that. We have a few phone calls we need to make with Perkins Eastman and with PAR. And then we'll work with Adam and Bob about
Big hole.
scheduling that as soon as, those dates as soon as possible. So. Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
That was perfect. Sorry, everybody. Worked good call.
How are you?